All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Dids in the Dugout. Joined here by a very special guest today, Connor Watson, lead hitting trainer of Driveline Baseball. Driveline, something I've been interested in for years that I admittedly don't know a whole lot about. I just kind of know the workings of it, the stuff that y'all do to help major league and college players. Seems to be a real big thing among baseball players, but we're going to dive into all that here in just a second. But Connor, first and foremost, how you doing today, bud?
Great, man. I appreciate you having me on. I'm originally from Omaha, Nebraska, so Ole Miss baseball is something that I'm pretty familiar with. So it's cool to talk to you.
Yeah, awesome. I was in Omaha a couple of years ago, obviously, when the Rebels were there. A really, really fun place to obviously catch some baseball games. They do one hell of a job with that College World Series up there, the whole city. I couldn't imagine a better place for it to be played. They're just incredible with the way they do things over there with the College World Series. So, that's pretty cool, man. So just first of all, getting started here, how did you get into Driveline Baseball and, this kind of work?
Yeah, well, I played baseball like most people growing up. I was okay. I wasn't definitely not good enough to play at Ole Miss. But with that, right, like I had to figure out ways to get better. And I think in all sports that I played, I was kind of like a natural like coach on the field. So when I got done playing, I knew I wanted to coach. And blessing in disguise, I had a couple of injuries that kind of forced my hand where it was like, hey, you're not playing anymore. You got to figure out what you're going to do. So I got lucky in the fact that I got to start coaching team baseball when I was like 19, 20 years old. I had started very, very fast. So I coached. I coached in some high school ball in my hometown, and then just developing relationships with college coaches for my players getting recruited. Ultimately, the question got asked like, "Hey, do you have any interest in coaching in college?" Which I did. And so just kind of climbed the ladder a little bit and. At the last school that I was at, I saw the internship for the hitting internship at Driveline open up. This was back in 2021, the summer, and kind of took a chance, sent in my resume, sent out a message to Chase Glom, who worked at Driveline at the time, to get a little bit of insight on the job. And lucky enough that they wanted to hire me. And I mean, a little over 2 years later, here I am in Arizona as the lead trainer down here.
Yeah, that had to be a really interesting time too. You talk about 2021. We all remember the year 2020, right? And everything that happened there that basically shut the country down, right? So that's for that to come up right after that, that was probably a bit of a gamble on your part on top of that, because I think everybody was still kind of searching for answers and where everybody's going from there, and businesses, careers, stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. But at Driveline, you're the lead hitting trainer there. Kind of what does that entail? Do you work mainly with college players, mainly MLB players? Is there a mixture of the two?
Yeah, there's definitely a mixture. So I got started as the lead trainer down here at our Arizona location about 2 years ago by now. So with that switch, my clientele did change a little bit, right? There's a ton of pros live down here. So we've got a little bit more of our pro client base down here than our headquarters up in Washington does, but they still get plenty of guys that go up there. But with that, there were plenty of guys that I trained in my time as an intern up in Washington that I've held on to this entire time, and Will Furnace being one of those guys. But that's kind of how it is. It's a little bit of a mixed bag, but for me personally, it's primarily pro guys. And then I've got this like mixed bag of like some college and even a couple like local high school guys that have been with me from the jump down here in Arizona when we hardly had anybody. So I'm not going to pass those guys off because we've got a great relationship. So a little bit of a mixed bag, but mainly pros.
Yeah, and I bet this time of year in particular is probably pretty hectic for you with spring training and everything going on. You being in Arizona, sure. I imagine you have a lot going on with some of the guys in spring training as well, don't you?
Yeah. So in-house, like in the gym, it's gotten very, very quiet. But that's only because like everybody is like whether they went off to their team in Florida or down here in Arizona. But the very cool part about having a location here is those guys that train with us that are on teams that are housed in Arizona for spring training. It's one text or call like, hey, something didn't feel right in the cage today. Can I come zip by the facility? And it's like, absolutely. So that's the really, really cool bonus about being down here.
Yeah, and you mentioned Will Furness as a guy that you work with. Obviously, people that listen to my show or just follow Ole Miss baseball in general know Will and know what kind of hitter he is, especially with the pedigree with his dad at LSU and the 1.5 million home runs that he hit down there in Baton Rouge throughout his career. But Will's a guy that obviously everybody up here really thinks a lot of. And you had tweeted something out after his moonshot that this past weekend that I thought was interesting. You said that two of the things that you had talked to Will about was, you don't have to swing 2-0, right? And a 3-2 count is not a 2-strike count; it's a 3-ball count. Yep. I read that and I just thought it was really interesting from a mindset and mental standpoint. But because of what guys would think in the box, 2-0, I might get a really good pitch here. I need to unleash right here no matter what. Do you kind of hammer home the idea of one pitch, one location in that scenario? And if you don't get it, just kind of let it go by and work the count from there?
Yeah, there's a million ways to answer this question, but to keep it as short as I can, this is where the relationship between me and Will really, really comes into play. He's a hitter, man. Like he wants to hit the baseball. Yeah. And because he's so good at that, and especially back in high school, like no one's going to throw that guy anything over the middle of the plate in high school because he's just going to hit a homer every time. Yeah. So he's had to get used to trying to impact the game by swinging at pitches that aren't necessarily like damage pitches. And sometimes that can like linger into later parts of your career where in your brain, it's like, oh, I can make contact with this. Well, that doesn't mean you should. So with Will, it's a lot of like, hey man, you have a ton of damage potential. Pitchers, while they are better now than they ever have been, the average miss distance, like from where they're intending to throw the ball to where it actually ends up in the major leagues is 11 inches. So in college, it's even more, right? Yeah. So we got to make these guys work. So with Will, it's like in a 2-0 count, man, like you said, it probably is one pitch, one spot. And if you don't, that's fine. And if you swing through, if some guy throws a changeup and you swing through it, cool. That's way better than slowing down and putting it in play and not getting the result you were looking for.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought that up because I talked to Will back in the fall. He was actually my first player guest on the show when I started this thing up, awesome. and he said something really similar to that. He was just coming off a summer ball. He'd had a pretty good summer. Yeah. Up there, hit a ton of doubles, right? Like that, and that was one thing that he talked about was making impact on damage pitches, but also being able to get to the ones that aren't where he's looking for it at, right? Not necessarily chasing or anything like that, but when he gets a pitch that he thinks he can handle, even if it's not where he wants it, still being able to get the bat and impact it hard enough to drive it into a gap somewhere. And then if you do that enough times, the big flies are going to end up coming. I think his dad used the term, all home runs are accidents, right? Good, because you're never trying to hit them initially.
Yeah.
So
for sure. The other thing that Will does really, really well, and I like obviously having Eddie in his back pocket is pretty cool. He's a hell of a man, hell of a father, and it's got to be awesome to be able to get that guy's feedback every day. But the other thing that Will has afforded himself the opportunity to do, based on kind of what Eddie said there, is like he got into Driveline before I was even hired. So like the importance of training bat speed was implemented on him from a young age. And so he like those like doubles, right, can turn into homers. Those miss hits that should be homers aren't outs anymore. They're doubles. Those blue balls that get caught by infielders turn into singles and so on and so forth. So he's afforded himself the opportunity to get away with stuff like that.
Yeah. And he was a guy that I was really impressed with as a true freshman. He came in to the SEC last year. And during SEC play alone, I think he hit 298, and that's just – so hard to do for really any good hitter, much less a true freshman coming right out of high school and handling the SEC pitching the way he did. I was so impressed with that, and obviously off to a really good start this year too. I think he's got 4 bombs already in the early going, so it's a lot of fun watching him have success. So I'm interested in whenever you get client X, whoever it may be, whether it be a college guy, a major leaguer, is there certain data you like to look at to try to come up with a way for them to make either better contact or be more patient or whatever it may be that's wrong with either their swing or their approach at that particular moment? Is there one thing that you always go to first?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily one thing. So I'll tell you this, like we are basically like an A/B test. That's what our company does, right? Like client X comes in, regardless of playing level, and they get a comprehensive assessment. So we're going to put a blast sensor on their bat to get bat speed, attack angle, a bunch of other metrics. We're going to have them take swings where the hit tracks monitor is reading everything. So we get all the batted ball data. And then the biggest piece of it is the motion capture assessment. So like, if you've ever seen guys who, I don't know, you may have seen videos of it on like our social media, but for those people who don't know, it's kind of the same way they make video games. So you basically put like marker sensors on your body where these high-speed cameras can track your movements. And for us, that's our best way to get the biomechanical data on how the body moves. So at the end of that process, it is really, really, really easy for us as the trainer to answer the question, what is this hitter's lowest hanging fruit? And then that's the answer to the question that you're asking me. So like, there isn't one thing in particular that I look for, but that's the first question I ask is what is this hitter's lowest hanging fruit? And then bang, we attack it that way. So yeah, that's kind of the answer to that.
Yeah. It seems like y'all have a just plethora of data that y'all look at with every one of these players. And with, I think, baseball more than any other sport right now, I think analytics has really taken it over, and in a good way. It's a much better product. You get, not only on the hitting side, a lot better hitters, but you get a lot better pitchers too, right? So, I mean, it's you get these incredible battles going head to head. Can you talk just a little bit about the impact that analytics has had on the game of baseball? Because you look, Lord, even 15 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, it just seems like almost a completely different game than what it is now.
Yeah, 100%. It's impacted it a lot, right? Like I think the biggest thing for me is when I was a player, right? Like every single day you go into the cage, the goal is to hit line drives that get to the back of the cage. And then you get into the game and it's like, if I hit that slightly left or slightly right, that is an out. Like that's an out. Like if I work on keeping this ball down, which it's a trainable skill and it's important to have that in the toolbox. But these things that didn't necessarily have data attached to them, right? Like batted balls in a batting cage had no data whatsoever. Now we're able to, whether it's like a Rapsodo unit on the ground, a TrackMan unit behind, a hit tracks, anything like that is able to define what good actually is. And I think more than anything, like it's not like all these old school thoughts were wrong. Like a lot of them were absolutely right. But I think what analytics have done for the game of baseball is it's just given us much more increased clarity on what good actually is. And then on top of that, right, like we keep branching off into, okay, we know that this is good. How can we make this better by adding X amount of inches of horizontal sweep on a pitch? Or like, hey, this shape is good, but the spin efficiency is bad. And we do different things like that. So like it can get really, really into the weeds for sure. But I'd say the biggest difference that analytics have made in baseball, it has clearly defined what we should be training because we now know what good actually looks like.
Yeah. Okay. So big question here for you. You're the lead hitting trainer. You have all these analytics. You're teaching guys to drive it to the gap, make hard contact. Do you ever bunt? Is that ever a thing?
Not in the facility, no.
Yeah.
But I will say, if I was still like coaching on a team, there would be a certain subset of hitters where it's like, hey, you need this tool in your toolbox, so we're going to work on this. I firmly believe people should be able to do it, but no, we don't work on it at Driveline. No.
Yeah. So with training hitters and all of that, is there any base running that goes into that you handle on your side? You see a bunch of sprint speed and stuff like that. Is that something y'all talk about? Even though you're a hitting trainer, do you handle some base running as well?
Right. No, but it's not like those conversations don't happen, especially during the pro off season. Mm-hmm. So the biggest way to answer this question here is at Driveline, we have multiple departments, but when we're talking about like the training floor itself, you have pitching, hitting, and you have HP, which stands for high performance, which is basically like strength and conditioning. Mm-hmm. So the guys over in HP they're so good. And the biggest thing for them is like, okay, we're going to develop sprint speed. We're going to you see guys out in the parking lot running curved sprints all the time because in baseball, you don't really run straight lines very much. So it's kind of silly to train that. Right. Yeah. So while we don't coach base running, the big thing at Driveline is developing skills that scale, which is like throwing, hitting, running, jumping, developing strength, things like that. And then it's always fun for us as hitting trainers to have those base running conversations because we miss it a little bit from being on the field. But so no, we don't coach it, but we talk about it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I actually never thought about that till you said it about you're really never running in a straight line in baseball. Yep. You're either, you're kind of like you said, you're curving, either going around first base or you're making a turn at second or trying to get around a tag or something like that. So it's hardly ever a legit straight line. So that's pretty interesting. I actually never thought about that. So that's pretty cool. Kind of wrapping it up with Furnace again. I know it's a guy we've talked about already, but, just kind of what is it like working with Will? I mean, he seems like, to me, one of those baseball junkie kind of guys where he just pours everything into the game and everything into training and getting better, and whatever he needs to do, he's going to do everything he can to make sure he has the abilities to do it, to be better for himself, but also the team. He seems like a really big team guy as well.
Yeah, 100%. When I first got him, when I was an intern, the coach that had previously had him before I got there, before he even got in, he was like, "You are going to love this guy and you're going to love his family." And boy, was he right. Will wants it really bad. He's also just got an insane amount of outlier skill that he's just had from the get-go from his dad. And he's all the success and all the things that he's working on from an individual standpoint are not for individual gain. He wants to be good so Ole Miss can come back to Omaha. He wants to be good so that he can provide for his future family one day by playing professional baseball. He doesn't want to be good because he wants all the accolades. Yeah. And in that, man, I've trained just about every personality type there is. It's a lot easier to train that guy than it is to train people who are in it for themselves. So I can't say enough good things about Will, and you guys are really lucky to have him.
Yeah. I kind of got that feeling from him. Like I said, I've only talked to him that one time on the show, but that's kind of the impression I got from him. Every question I asked him, even when I tried leading it into a Will Furnace question, what do you need to do here or do this? He always was able, no matter what, to direct it back to the team, to his teammates, and everything was about getting better to make it easier and to help the team win and not for his own personal gain. And like you said, that's a very, very rare personality trait, especially in today's age where so many people are out for themselves. And Will definitely seems to be one of the guys that absolutely it. And so super happy to have him here at Ole Miss, and happy he's having success. Can't wait for the SEC season to get going and see what he can get started here in SEC play and further the success he's having. So, Connor, that's really all I have for you today, man. I appreciate you joining me. I found all of this incredibly interesting, and would love to sit down and talk with you again sometime and maybe dig a little bit deeper into analytics, hitting stuff like that. I think this is something people are really going to enjoy listening to, that I don't think enough people put this kind of stuff out. They hear about Driveline and analytics, but they don't really, sit somebody down and try to pick their brain at least a little bit to figure out what all it is. So so that was really interesting. All the stuff y'all do, all the tests y'all run, data you collect, and obviously the job y'all have done with Will and the work Will's put in himself is definitely paying dividends to the Ole Miss Rebels right now. And not a doubt in my mind it will continue to pay dividends the rest of the year and however far Will ends up going with this. So it's going to be interesting to see. But Connor, once again, I appreciate you joining me, man. And you have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Of course, you do the same.
Thanks, bud.
Yep.